I never thought I'd be standing in front of my vacation house, looking at a large no trespassing sign and a brand new security gate that my own parents had installed. The universe seems to have been upended in the most agonizing way imaginable. Let me go back a bit. This whole problem began a year ago, although to be honest, I should have anticipated it long before. My name is Emma, and I grew up in a family that I assumed was typical of the middle class. My mother, Rachel, had a small bookshop, while my father, Brian, taught high school. They put forth a lot of effort to make ends meet, but we constantly appeared to lag behind. We drove old cars, lived in a small house, and took camping excursions rather than expensive vacations. However, there was always a murmur of dissatisfaction, particularly from Mom. I sensed her desire. Each time we walked past the opulent lakefront homes, she would say, "Imagine living in one of those," in a dreamy voice. Dad would whisper something about shallow people and new money, yet I could always see him snooping around those houses as well. A view of the water, dinner parties on the deck. It seemed as though neither of them had the courage to admit that they were both caught up in this silent race. However, Grandma Rose was not like that. She was happy doing the little things, like volunteering, reading, and gardening, at her small cottage nestled in the woods. She taught me what true happiness was, and I loved spending time with her. "Money is just a tool, Emma," she would say to me while smiling softly and sipping her tea. "It's not the key to happiness. Happiness comes from what you build, not what you own." Over the years, her knowledge has remained with me. I became aware of my parents' expenses to maintain appearances as I grew older. They accumulated loans for new cars they couldn't afford and home improvement loans. Naturally, Grandma was always aware of their recent purchases, but Mom would always ask me not to tell her about them. With knowledge, she would say, "Your mother is chasing rainbows." True wealth isn't about what you want, Emma. It's about what you build. Grandma was ecstatic when I was accepted to State University on a half scholarship. But my parents? They weren't overjoyed. The next night, the dispute about money raged through the house like a thunderstorm, and I could hear Mom whispering to herself about how Jennifer's daughter got into Princeton. Grandma called me over the following day in a gentle yet worried voice. Her eyes gleamed with secret knowledge as she gave me a hefty packet. As she showed me the documentation for a $800,000 trust, she stated, "I've been investing for decades." I assured her that I would respect her desires, and I did. "This is for you, Emma. Use it wisely. And don't tell your parents. They wouldn't understand. I led a frugal life throughout college and the first few years of my profession, allowing the trust to develop. I felt as though I had lost the only person who really understood me when Grandma passed away during my senior year. My parents, meanwhile, were in a downward spiral. The bookstore was struggling to make ends meet, and Dad's teacher salary was insufficient to support their unsustainable way of life. Money-related arguments were like the background music to my existence. Then came last summer's pivotal talk. Mom was talking about their friends' vacation houses while we were eating dinner. She groaned and looked longingly away. "The Hendersons just bought a place with a private dock and a guest house," she said. Then, with that familiar expression in her eyes, she turned to face me. She was going to make a request, and I could practically hear her thoughts. "Emma, sweetie," she remarked in a gentle voice, "you're doing so well, and that inheritance, it's just sitting there, isn't it?" I said. "I'm investing it, Mom, even though I didn't want to answer." Her eyes gleamed as she continued, ignoring me. "But think of what we could do with it. There's this gorgeous lake house, 4 bedrooms, a private beach. The asking price is a steal." Dad jumped right in. "It could be a family home, something we can all enjoy. Your grandmother would have wanted that, right?" I allowed my instincts to wear me down, even though they were all telling me to leave. They emphasized that it would strengthen the bonds within the family and promised to handle the taxes and maintenance. I agreed against my better judgment. For tax purposes, the house was titled in all of our names, and the whole purchase price was paid with the $800. From Grandma's trust. For a time, everything appeared to be fine. For a little while, I felt like I belonged by helping to decorate and planting flowers on the deck. Then, however, cracks started to show. "Emma, this is an event for our social circle. Why don't you visit another time? Mom said, dismissing me from their first dinner party at the house. I was never invited for the following few months. It became evident that I didn't fit into their new way of life when they said things like, "We need some privacy," "There are guests over," or "We're settling in." The gate, the sign, and then the text message that broke everything apart came next. "Emma, we've decided it's best if you give us space to enjoy the vacation home. We'll let you know when it's a good time to visit." Something snapped inside of me as I stood there looking at that sign in front of that gate. With shaking hands, I took out my phone and dialed the number I knew I had to call, echoing Grandma's words, "Don't let anyone pressure you into spending it foolishly. Chen Patricia, my attorney." I knew I needed her now more than ever because she had assisted in settling Grandma's estate. As I remembered, her office was tidy, simple, and somehow threatening at the same time. Patricia, with her gray-streaked hair tucked back into a tight bun, was also intelligent and self-assured. She wasted no time. She narrowed her eyes as she turned the pages of the documents I gave her, scanning them. She said, "Let me get this straight," in a steady, accurate voice. "You used your entire inheritance to buy a lake house, but your parents' names are on the deed too?" I felt the burden of my error bearing down on me as I nodded. They had informed me that we would all share it merely for the purpose of simplicity. However, Patricia's expression stayed expressionless at this point, even though I could see her thoughts racing. At last, she swiveled her screen in my direction and displayed the property tax documents. "Take a look," she instructed him. I leaned forward, gasping for air. The deed did not bear my name. Only Brian and Rachel Mitchell were listed. "This can't be," I muttered. "I was there when we signed the papers." "My name was on them," Patricia gave a somber nod. "The deed you signed was never submitted to the county," she stated. "The papers your parents filed with the county recorder only have their names. This is fraud, plain and simple." I was struck like a hammer by the term fraud. The weight of the reality was crushing me as it set in. They had betrayed me in the worst way imaginable they had taken from me. However, it didn't stop there. Patricia produced an additional document. "Your parents also took out a $200,000 home equity line of credit against the property." My stomach rumbled. My voice was hardly audible above a whisper when I inquired, "What can we do?" Patricia's piercing eyes gleamed with resolve as she sat back in her chair. "We fight back. I've already drafted the paperwork for a civil suit. We'll file for an emergency injunction to block them from taking out any more loans. And then we'll pursue legal action to restore your name on the deed and recover damages." I paused. I felt a shiver of guilt. I assumed they were my parents. What if our family is split up by this? Patricia's voice grew softer, but her determination remained unwavering. "Emma, your grandmother set up that trust for you. She wanted you to have a secure future. What would she say if she saw this?" I didn't have to give it much thought. "Stand your ground, Emma. Don't let anyone take advantage of your kindness." Grandma Rose's voice could be heard in my head. I suddenly realized what I needed to accomplish. I was enraged and incredulous for the next few days. The truth about my parents' actions hit me like an unstoppable flood. The betrayal was what hurt me the most, not just the fact that they had stolen the house away from me. Grandma's desires for my future, as well as the $800,000 she had left me, had been broken. I was left out in the cold as my parents squandered my money to create their own little world of luxury. They lacked the courtesy to be honest with me. I had to learn the lesson the hard way. Patricia worked quickly. She was a natural force, and I knew I needed her support. She filed a lawsuit over the course of the following several days, obtaining an injunction to prevent any more loans and attempts to sell the home. This abrupt change in circumstances obviously caught my folks off guard. They were caught off guard. However, I didn't either. Mom was the first person I heard from following the court filing, and it wasn't an appeal for sympathy. No, there was an assault. Her comments hurt, but not in the way she meant. "Emma, how could you betray us like this? After everything we've done for you," she said. I didn't feel betrayed since I fought back. No, it was because they were attempting to grab something that wasn't really theirs. Dad didn't send a text. He called instead. Before responding, I let it ring 3 times. Despite the calmness of his words, I could detect the frustration underneath. He dubbed me Princess, a moniker he hadn't used for years. "I know this is hard, but We need to fix this as a family. We can come to an agreement, can't we? I forced myself to ignore the guilt that was beginning to seep into my chest. I would no longer allow them to control me. I inhaled deeply while attempting to steady my voice. Fix this? You mean like you fixed the deed? Like you stole my inheritance, Dad? That's what you want me to fix? You've already destroyed everything. No, Dad. We're not fixing this. You'll face the consequences of your actions. It was so quiet on the other end of the phone. He was unsure of how to react. However, the harm was already done. It was too late to turn back now. My parents had gone too far. Mom texted me a few hours after that. We earned that house, Emma. We worked hard for it. Stop causing drama and ruining this for us. I was so furious that I could hardly contain it. Earned it? Earned it? You didn't earn anything, Mom. You manipulated me into using my inheritance, and now you're pretending like it was all part of some family plan. I wanted to shout at her, but didn't. I sent the text to Patricia instead. As I stated in the message, this is what I'm up against. They won't stop lying. Patricia quickly responded, saying, let them dig themselves deeper. The more they talk, the more they expose themselves. And they did precisely that. I soon came upon their posts on social media. Images of them smiling broadly, holding champagne glasses, and throwing a spectacular party at the lake house. Like salt on an open wound, the caption read, so blessed to have our dream vacation home, making memories with dear friends in our private paradise. You deserve this. Hard work pays off. And living the dream were among the statements that infuriated me. I sent Patricia the message. The words, they're still flaunting it, I wrote. I can't believe this is happening. Although Patricia's response was composed, I felt encouraged by what she said. This is gold. Let them keep posting. The judge will love this. They're digging their own grave. After that, I didn't reply to my parents. Nothing they said would alter the truth of what they had done. They had exposed their actual selves. I concentrated on the legal procedure as the days went by. I had no time for their phone calls or their manipulation of my emotions. The evidence was growing. Although Patricia had obtained the injunction, which prevented additional loans, I was aware that this was only the first step. It was not going to be easy for my parents to die. However, as the weeks passed, an unforeseen event occurred. The remorse that I had been striving so hard to suppress began to return. I reflected on my upbringing by my parents. Even if it was never enough for them, I considered how hard they worked. Despite everything, I couldn't help but feel a little sorry for them because they were still my parents. It was getting more and more difficult to handle the situation. The last straw was when Mom posted something else. This time, it was a picture of her and her father enjoying champagne while gazing out over the water from the lake house's porch. One of those cliched inspirational sayings that always made my skin crawl was in the caption, sometimes you have to protect your peace and cut out negativity. Haven family. Some people just don't understand class. For what seemed like an age, I gazed at the post. Every sight and every word felt like a fresh blow to the face. Everything was reduced to this trivial, materialistic game. Even the house, my fortune, and my grandmother's wishes. I made no hesitation at all. I sent Patricia the message. I wrote, this seals it, they're done. In her succinct but unflinching response, Patricia said, this will be the final nail in their coffin. I had no idea how long it would take for things to come together, but I was certain that I would not back down. Never, ever. The court date finally arrived, the day we had been anticipating. I had no idea what to anticipate, but I couldn't help but picture a lavish, dramatic courtroom scene in which my parents would ultimately be held accountable for their deeds. Reality, of course, was much less dramatic. I was surprised by how little the courtroom was. It was a small room with wooden benches and fluorescent lighting above, not the imposing hall I had seen in movies. On the other side of the room, my parents were dressed as though they were getting ready for another elaborate meal at the lake house. Dad was dressed in his best suit, and Mom was wearing the same pricey outfit that she had shared on social media. They refused to look into my eyes. As one might anticipate, James Wilson, their attorney, had a gray suit, gray hair, and a gray disposition. During pre-trial conferences, he boasted about his decades of experience in an attempt to scare Patricia. But Patricia was not intimidated. "Let's see what 40 years of experience can learn today," she said, flashing her trademark predator smile. The first thing the judge, Helen Martinez, did was go over the evidence. She went through the paperwork, including the phony deed my parents had filed, the original purchase agreement with my name on it, the bank statements that showed where my inheritance had disappeared, and of course, the posts on social media. The judge's face was visible to me as she went over the evidence. In particular, she lingered on one post, the one about removing bad influences and comprehending class. I saw her turn to Mom. "Can you explain why you filed a deed excluding your daughter when she provided the entire purchase price for the property?" the judge said in a calm but forceful voice. With practiced grace, Mom smoothed her clothing and got to her feet. "Your Honor, we were just trying to protect our family's interests. Emma is young and impulsive, and we didn't want her to make a bad decision with the property." The judge's eyebrows went up. "Poor choices? You mean like taking out a $200,000 equity line of credit to buy luxury furniture, boats, and even membership to an exclusive lake club?" Mom stopped. In an attempt to regain his composure, Dad said, "Your Honor, everything we did was for the family's legacy. We just wanted to create something beautiful for all of us." He was interrupted by the judge. "Are you familiar with the legal definition of fraud?" Father's face lost its color. Patricia didn't even have to speak again. The evidence was self-evident. Judge Martinez's eyes were clear and focused as she turned to face me. "Miss Mitchell, your petition to correct the deed is granted. I'm also referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal charges. The property deed will be transferred solely to Emma Mitchell, and the home equity loan will be the responsibility of David and Rachel Mitchell. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises," she went on, and I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. Everything seemed to have changed in that instant. I had prevailed. Although the court decision was a success, it wasn't as pleasant as I had hoped. I had always imagined a big, decisive moment where everything would come together and my parents would have to deal with the fallout from their greed. I had always imagined a spectacular, emotional victory, but I felt a terrible, hollow sadness descend in my chest as the judge's gavel smashed down and the audience fell silent. I felt as though I had triumphed in a conflict, but had lost something more profound. Yes, the house belonged to me, but at what price? I had no desire to celebrate. I was numb. The days that followed were a haze. The decision became official when Patricia forwarded the documents for my signature. The $200,000 Shum equity debt was now my parents' obligation, and they had 48 hours to leave the house. However, I kept thinking about how much this had affected my family. No matter how severely they had betrayed me, my parents were still my parents. Even still, it was difficult to recall the pleasant times when all I could see were the falsehoods they had lived their entire lives on. I attempted to phone them. I needed closure, not because I believed it would make things better. They had to be aware of the seriousness of what they had done. Naturally, it went straight to voicemail when I started with Mom. When I called Dad, there was still no answer. I finally messaged both of them. Easy, straightforward. "We must discuss the house. I am aware of the loan and the deed. Give me a call, please." Hours went by. Nothing. No answer. Then my phone buzzed as the twilight was beginning to set in. I glanced at the screen. Mom gave it to me. "I have no idea what you're discussing. We own the lake house. We merited it." The advice she sent was clear and blunt. Stop creating drama. As I read the words, my fingers clenched around my phone. Earned it. How was that possible? They had only manipulated me. I couldn't decide if I should laugh or cry. She was trying to seem as if nothing had occurred after I had just gone through hell in a courtroom. I tried not to panic, but I was fuming from the inside out. When I checked my social media, I saw that Mom had once again boasted about the lake house. Pictures of her and her father standing on the deck with champagne in their hands and beaming faces. The caption said, "We are so fortunate to have our ideal vacation home where we can create memories with our closest friends in our own little paradise." All of the remarks were positive. "This is something you deserve," someone wrote. "Hard work is rewarded," another person said. Every message was like a needle sting. They seemed to support my parents for stealing from me, as if they were all complicit in the lie. I sent Patricia the message. With shaking hands, I typed, "This is what I'm dealing with." She responded quickly, "This is helpful. Don't answer. Allow them to delve farther." I wanted to respond, to argue, to reveal all. Patricia, however, was correct. They further cemented their own doom the more they showed it off. With each post they made, the reality became more apparent. They were unable to avoid it. A week went by. Except for sporadic passive-aggressive texts or posts on social media, neither mom nor dad had communicated. They were making an effort to minimize the situation and act as though nothing was amiss. But I knew better. They didn't want to acknowledge that they were drowning in guilt. They couldn't acknowledge it, not right now. It was difficult, but I tried not to think about them. The money wasn't the only factor. The trust was the reason, the legacy of Grandma Rose. All she had desired for me. My parents were battling to take that away from me, and I was fighting to keep it intact. It was impossible to overlook the contrast, and then the phone rang. Dad was there. I could still hear the underlying sense of entitlement in his hesitant, almost contrite speech. He used that moniker that had always made me sick to my stomach. "Princess," he muttered. "I know things have gotten out of hand, but we didn't mean for it to go this far. We were just trying to protect the family." As I spoke, my jaw tightened and my mouth ached from the words. "Protect the family? You've been using me, Dad. You've been using my inheritance, my grandmother's legacy, to fund your own selfish dreams. And now you're trying to act like it's all for the family? How could you even think that?" The other end paused for a long moment. Then came Dad's quiet, begging voice. "I know, Emma, I know. But we've worked so hard to make this family something to be proud of. I didn't want to let you down." My heart twisted. I wanted to think he was real. It was my hope that there was still some truth in what he was saying. However, the more I considered it, the more I saw that they had always been acting in their own best interests. I inhaled deeply. "Dad, I don't know how much more I can say. You've already crossed a line. I can't look at you the same way anymore." His voice broke. "Please, Emma, I'm begging you. Let's fix this. Let's make it right." I laughed resentfully. "No. You had your chance to make things right. This isn't about fixing things. It's about facing the consequences." Before he could utter another word, I hung up. I was not interested in hearing it. I didn't want any more excuses or hollow assurances. It was time to deal with the consequences of their decisions. I drove up to the lake house the following day. My home on the lake, the house I was legally entitled to. I experienced an odd variety of feelings when I arrived. Yes, there was relief, but there was also a great deal of sorrow. There was a mess in the house when my parents left. Scratched floors, empty wine bottles, and furniture that appeared to have been used and thrown away. Despite the chaos, there was a sense of closure to the location. This was the last chapter. I cleaned all day. I rearranged the furniture, cleaned the rooms, and opened the windows to allow in some fresh air. I discovered one of Mom's fancy scarves in the bedroom while searching through a drawer. I gave it along with everything else they had left behind because I had no idea what to do with it. I sipped tea on the deck that night while looking at old pictures on my phone. I was drawn to one of them. It was a photo of me and Grandma Rose smiling in her garden. I recalled how secure I felt with her, but I was unable to pinpoint the precise moment it was taken. She would have cherished this home for its tranquility rather than its opulence, its calm. I took a big breath and reclined in my chair. It was this. The burden that had been stifling me for so long was finally lifted. I wasn't merely taking back my inheritance. I was getting my peace back. I was going to develop riches. As Grandma Rose had always said, true wealth isn't about what you own, it's about what you build. I was going to construct a better thing, something significant. I contacted a nearby charity the following day. They helped families whose children were fighting cancer by providing them with the opportunity to remain in lovely houses and create memories during trying times. I made the house available to them. When I wasn't around, they could use it, allowing those families to find some light in the midst of their darkest moments. Mom must have learned. She texted me later that day in a rage, accusing me of wrecking everything. She was furious, saying, "How dare you let strangers use our lake house?" I did not respond, so I blocked her number. In actuality, she was correct on one point. The house wasn't intended for that usage. The mansion was not intended for their opulence or self-centered aspirations. Something better was intended, something unadulterated. After a year, the house was doing well. It served as a haven for the most vulnerable families. What about my parents? I no longer gave them much thought. I remembered the young girl who had embraced me the previous weekend, gazing out over the lake with happy eyes. Now, that was what was important. I silently toasted Grandma Rose with my tea. I muttered, "What you build is what truly makes you wealthy, not what you own." And I was creating something lovely. The months following the court case seemed to go slowly. The house had changed from being a representation of manipulation and treachery to a haven. It felt like home to more than simply the families who stayed there. Even if it wasn't the location I had first envisioned for myself, it was the way I had changed it, giving it vitality and purpose. For years, I had been enmeshed in my parents' aspirations, constantly aiming for something more dazzling and superior. Despite all they had done, it was difficult to break such behaviors. But I had changed in some way. I was no longer in need of their approval. I didn't require what they considered to be the hallmarks of success. I wanted and needed peace that I could create, not purchase. However, it wasn't simple. I would occasionally catch myself thinking back on what had been taken from me. The house wasn't the only thing. What had been destroyed was the concept of family. I never thought my parents would turn on me in this way. They were meant to be the ones I could rely on, the ones who would keep me safe and stand by me when things became too much. Everything felt different now, though. On other evenings, I would sit on the lake home porch and gaze out over the water while the wind ruffled my hair, and I felt the weight of everything bearing down on me. I missed my family's previous iteration, when riches and prestige weren't the driving forces. The family I recalled was the one that went camping and spent peaceful evenings together in the kitchen. The family I want. However, that version had vanished and had been replaced by something hollow and unfamiliar to me. The sting returned because of the small things. I've seen pictures of Mom and her friends in a store, wearing dresses that I knew were much beyond her budget, or Dad sharing a picture of a boat they just bought, but was somehow already moored at a private harbor. They didn't understand what real riches was. But in spite of everything, I still harbored the secret hope that they may change. But I knew better in my heart. Nevertheless, I made an effort to keep going. I was pleased each time I walked by the charity that had taken over the property. I was aware that the house was now providing families with a getaway from the chaos, something I would never be able to have. The folks my parents surrounded themselves with were very different from the families who came to stay. They were authentic. They were having difficulty. However, they were also vibrant, and I sensed the change in energy whenever they arrived. The house was now a place of healing rather than greed, and I was thankful for that. I noticed that I was thinking more of Grandma Rose in the silence, when I wasn't attempting to block out the memories. Her home has always been a place of intentional living and simplicity. I had no idea how she would feel about what had transpired. Would she have wished I had made an effort to make amends with my parents? Or would she have been proud of me for sticking to my principles? In all honesty, I had no answers. However, I was certain that Mom would have been pleased with my current state of the house. I discovered a tiny, worn box hidden in the dirt one evening while I was tidying up the yard and planting some fresh flowers by the deck. As I knelt to open it, my heart skipped a beat. A pocket watch, old coins, and a folded note from Grandma Rose were among the limited assortment of treasures found inside. Despite the lump in my throat, I couldn't help but smile. It seemed to be a sign, a reminder that I was still doing morally in spite of everything. I had the box next to me while I sat at the kitchen table that evening, drinking a cup of tea. As I read the note, I could just hear her voice, calm and gentle. In my head, Emma, don't let the world tell you who you are. You already have everything you need to build the life you want. Just remember, true wealth isn't measured in what you own. It's measured by what you give away. Once so straightforward, those remarks suddenly seemed like the best guidance I could ever receive. It was simple to lose yourself in the world's cacophony and the never-ending loop of striving for something better or bigger. However, Grandma Rose was correct all along. I was never intended to live up to anyone else's definition of success. I was supposed to make my own. Things became more apparent the longer I sat with those words. It wasn't only that I wanted to keep the house. I was clinging to what it stood for, my own resilience, my grandmother's legacy, and the knowledge that I could be happy without seeking acceptance from others. I could create a destiny that was genuinely mine, free from my parents' decisions and their desire for prestige. Change came gradually over the next few months. I began to think more about what I could offer than what I could receive. The house was no longer a burden. It was something I could share, not something I had to struggle for. I opened the house to others in need by contacting a few more groups and charities. Families who were unable to pay for a trip, parents without children who simply wanted a few days to rest. There were people engaged in combat that I could not even fathom. As I came to perceive the house as a healing tool for them, it also started to heal me. With every family that moved in, I felt a little less burden lifted, and the compassion that had taken over the lake house thrived. Even while it wasn't always easy, and I wasn't content with everything, I was making progress. And it was sufficient. I went for a walk on the beach close to the house one evening after a family had departed. The sky was tinted in shades of orange and purple as the sun began to set. As I strolled alongside the water's edge, I couldn't help but feel incredibly at ease. I didn't feel like I had the entire world on my shoulders for the first time in a long time. I had freedom, free to create a life that was genuinely mine, free from the guilt that had plagued me, and free from the expectations of my parents. I became aware that I was living, not merely existing, at that very moment. And that seemed like a victory more than anything else. For a while, I just stood there and observed the waves. At last, I muttered, "Grandma Rose, thank you. I'm beginning to understand." And I felt at last at home in that silent moment as the sky's last remaining light vanished. It had been a year since the war for the lake house had concluded, and everything had changed. I had experienced a lot during that period, including perplexity, betrayal, and fury. But in some way, there was a bit more clarity and serenity every day. Even though I wasn't always certain of everything and it wasn't flawless, I was at last leading a life that was truly mine, one that is influenced by my own decisions rather than my parents' wishes or expectations. I no longer felt the need to win their acceptance. It was liberating in a sense, as if I were letting go of a burden that had been weighing me down for years. The mansion, which had previously represented their dominance over me, now served as a symbol of hope for others. With it, the charity had done miracles, cheering up and consoling needy families. I also felt a stronger bond with the legacy of Grandma Rose, the woman who had shown me what real riches meant, with every new family that entered my life. Never before had her lessons been so obvious. It wasn't about how many possessions you had or how many things you could accumulate in your lifetime that defined true prosperity. It had nothing to do with the material things that so many others seemed to be obsessed with. It had to do with what you could offer, what you could construct. And I was creating something significant for the first time. My parents' calls had ceased to ring on the phone. I was aware that they were still attempting to maintain the facade of a flawless life. They continued to share images and act as though nothing was wrong. However, I had lost interest in their world. I had stopped looking back and had come to terms with what had transpired. The house was now a place of healing and purpose rather than bitterness or regret. One peaceful evening, I recall enjoying a cup of tea while relaxing on the porch and allowing the evening air to caress me. I could practically hear the soil breathing beneath me, and it was one of those times when everything seemed to be motionless. The laughter of the families who had stayed here was now only a faint echo in my heart, and the house was silent. And I felt like I had found my place in the world for the first time in a long time. I started thinking about the future at that point. I reflected on what I had built and what I could still build. I knew I wanted to continue donating, perhaps because of the people I had met along the way, the ones who had remained at the house and told me their experiences. Even if it was simply giving someone an opportunity to take a break and find calm in an otherwise hectic world, I wanted to do my part to help. The telephone rang. A message. It came from a number I was unfamiliar with. I looked at it for a while, not sure if I should open it. However, I did. "Emma, this is Patricia. I need you to call me when you have a moment. It's important. I felt a pit in my gut. Patricia had been in touch with me regarding my parents the last time. I had no idea what this was about, but I could tell by the sensation in my chest that it wasn't something little. My fingers shaking, I held the phone to my ear and dialed her number. I've been going over some last details about your parents and their finances, and I need to let you know that things aren't as clean as we thought, Patricia remarked in a calm but serious tone. My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? Patricia clarified. It appears that there are still loose ends. More debts tied to the house debts they tried to hide. And unfortunately, I believe your parents are trying to push through one last claim to the house. It's all legal paperwork, and it's not something that's easy to fight. But you need to know that we could be facing this again. The words' weight began to sink into my bones. Once more? Just when I believed I was at last free of everything, Patricia went on. I know this is a lot, and I don't want to stir up old wounds, but I'm advising you to prepare. If they're still going to fight this, you need to be ready. The news weighed heavily on my chest as I sat in quiet for a while. I hadn't anticipated this after everything. I didn't think they would continue to pursue what was rightfully mine, but after giving it some thought, I understood that this was just another conflict. One more exam. I wasn't going to allow them to steal anything from me again, because they had already attempted to take everything. Despite my pounding heart, I added, "Thanks for letting me know," in a firm voice. "I'll be ready." I hung up and sat looking out over the sea for a long time. It had always been about more than just ownership, but now the house was mine. I wanted to take back my life, getting my tranquility back. It would be impossible for my parents to take away what I had created here, no matter how hard they tried. The property wasn't the only factor here. It was about defending morality even when the battle felt never-ending. Grandma Rose's heritage, the principles she taught me, and the future I was now building were all to be honored. So I took the necessary action. In case this took longer than I had hoped, I got in touch with Patricia once more and asked her to collect the necessary evidence. The house was no longer the main focus. Making sure my parents couldn't control me again was the goal, ensuring they realized I wasn't their puppet. And it became more obvious the more I considered it. I refused to be controlled by them. No more. Never again. I contacted the nonprofit organization that had been occupying the lake cottage. I asked the director how they were doing and whether they needed any additional assistance. They were looking to grow after being appreciative of the room. I assured them that, despite the chaos my parents were attempting to generate, I would continue to look for ways to help them and ensure the house continued to function. Over the past year, I've come to realize that family isn't always defined by blood. Family was made up of people who helped you through difficult times, who stuck by you when the world tried to pull you down, and who encouraged you when you needed it most. I had created a family around me, and that was my true family. The one I was building with every individual I assisted and every family that found solace in the home. I understood that the value of what I had already created was greater than anything my parents could ever take away from me. That evening, as the sun was sinking behind me, I stepped out onto the porch and experienced a calm. The house had evolved from a piece of real estate. It served as a home for needy families, a place of purpose, and a legacy of healing and compassion. And I had at last discovered what Grandma Rose had always understood, that genuine prosperity came from giving rather than from possessing, and I realized what she meant for the first time. I was wealthy, not in material possessions, but in peace, love, and purpose, and that was more than sufficient. I inhaled deeply as the chilly air filled my lungs. The future seemed unknown, and the globe seemed vast. However, I realized for the first time in a long time that I was right where I was supposed to be.